Welcome back. This is the continuation of Delta 7, Chapter 1, Part 2. A particularly novel aspect of F-111 flying was the so-called TFR letdown. This maneuver could be particularly unnerving to those new to the F-111, especially when accomplished at night. Immediately upon connecting the TFR, the aircraft would rapidly pitch over to a nearly 10-degree nose-low attitude. It would maintain this gentle descent until about 5,000 feet above the ground, when it would pitch over further and begin screaming towards the black void below. For the uninitiated, this maneuver appeared near suicidal, especially when descending into mountainous terrain. During this maneuver, a pilot caught occasional glimpses of potentially deadly hills gliding past the cockpit canopy, while wisps of clouds or lines of trees on these summits would compete for his attention. A seasoned F-111 pilot was well trained and learned to concentrate on the information presented on the many dials, gauges, and screens in the cockpit rather than the potentially deadly terrain racing by outside his jet. Carter had successfully completed his own TFR letdown only minutes before coasting in over Libya's northern shoreline. As they streaked ever closer to their target, Carter pulled down his oxygen mask and took a sip of water from the small flask he was carrying in his anti-G suit. Ever since they had crossed over the Libyan coastline, he had begun to prepare himself mentally for what lay ahead. His stomach had been doing somersaults for the past several minutes, and the cool water helped calm him. Carter and his squadron would be striking the east side of the airport, where the Libyan Air Force had its largest base. Satellite photography from the night before had shown that several Libyan military transport aircraft were parked on the tarmac. Would they still be there? How much anti-aircraft artillery, or AAA, would the Libyans fire at them? How many missiles would they launch? Would the missiles be guided? Will I make it through the target area? As Carter continued to go over the mission in his mind, he kept repeating the most important mantra of every fighter pilot: "Don't let me screw up." As his F-111 continued along toward the target area, flying only 200 feet above the desert sands, Carter thought about his squadron mates flying along behind him. There was only 1 minute separating each jet in the formation, and all were heading to different targets around the international airport. He wondered if their stomachs were churning as much as his was. He glanced over at Knife, head buried in the feedback. "How's it going?" Carter asked. "System looks pretty tight. PaveTac's painting a great picture. I just saw a caravan of camels off to the right." Knife seemed to be enjoying the view outside the aircraft provided by the PaveTac infrared and laser targeting pod. True to form, Knife seemed immune to any concern for his safety. His voice was steady and calm, as if he were flying a regular training mission. There was little indication in their voices that these two airmen were minutes away from bombing military targets on the east side of Tripoli's international airport. Carter tapped Knife's arm to get him to remove his head from the shroud around his radar and infrared screens. He silently pointed ahead to the lights on the horizon, the city of Tripoli. "Guess it's too late to turn around now," joked Carter over the intercom. "We didn't come all this way to screw it up or turn around," replied Knife. Suddenly, off in the distance, they could see violent flashes augmenting the nighttime lights of the city. The intermittent bursts of light were the work of the harm shooters, softening up the Libyan air defense network. Carter knew that at this very moment, the pilots from the wing's other squadrons were on the final run to their targets in downtown Tripoli. The F-111's radio suddenly came to life. After hours of silence, there was now a cacophony of radio calls. "Jewel 6-1, feet wet, Tranquil Tiger. Zulu Tango 4, up 3, looks good. Karma 5-1, feet wet, Frosty Freezer." As Carter listened to the frantic radio chatter, he tallied up the results. Jewel 6-1 and Karma 5-1 were calling feet wet. That meant they were returning north away from Libya. Tranquil Tiger indicated a successful strike. Frosty Freezer, on the other hand, indicated an unsuccessful target run. The other gibberish about Tango Zulu meant nothing to Carter. Must be some Navy lingo, he thought. "Left turn, heading 342, push it up," barked Knife. "Roger, master arm on," replied Carter, pushing the jet throttles up to increase the F-111 speed to 600 knots for the final run towards the target area. Now was not the time to think about the other air crews in his wing. He had enough to do in his own cockpit, his own target to hit. 1 minute, Carter said, calling out the readout from his heads-up display indicating the time remaining to weapons release. In 1 minute they would be over the airport tarmac, releasing their 12 500-pound parachute-retarded bombs. Carter watched the unbelievable light show unfolding ahead. It was almost beautiful, definitely surreal, but potentially lethal. Every single Libyan with a gun seemed to be firing wildly into the sky. Tracer rounds were scratching arcs of light all over. Eerily, he could see the bright illumination of the international terminal in the distance off to his left, and could make out the individual civilian aircraft parked at the terminal. It would appear that no one on that side of the airport was aware that attack was underway and had not turned off any of the airport lighting. The attacking jets were fortunate, as it appeared that the Libyan gunners were shooting blindly. Carter realized that there was still an awful lot of lead in the sky ahead, and he found himself fighting the urge to flinch. Despite all the lethal mayhem around him, Carter's training kicked in. He took a deep breath and scanned his instruments. Airspeed, 5 knots slow, speed up. Steering bars, very slight deflection to the left. Ease the stick over in that direction to center it up. Altitude, steady at 200 feet. Threat scope, clear. TFR radar, normal. In the distance, a continuing series of explosions were lighting up the night sky over downtown Tripoli. Carter's jet continued ever closer to the target. They were now within the airfield boundary. He could make out the blurred shadows of runways and taxiways whizzing by his speeding F-111. 20 seconds, Carter called out. Chaff, chaff, Carter thought to himself as he clicked the chaff dispenser lever with the tips of his fingers of his left hand, releasing bundles of aluminum strips to confuse the Libyan radar operators. He continued to dispense chaff, knowing that from this point on he must fly straight ahead without defensive maneuvering in order to get to the exact weapons release point. This is the end of Chapter 1, Part 2. We hope you're enjoying this short preview of the novel Delta 7. If you'd like to learn more about Delta 7, please visit our website at www.delta7book.com. To enjoy the final part of the first chapter, please select Chapter 1, Part 3. This is John Cathcart, the author. Thanks for watching.